Alright, as per your request, I'm going to clarify the last couple of techniques a little for you. The first one I'm going to tell you about is the Hollingworth cull, and I don't have an application for it. It's one of those things that's just interesting. Let's say, well, we'll use diamonds. You can look. I'm going to take the diamonds out as they come to them. They're in no order whatsoever. I hope I get them all, just to show you. The idea is that you can arrange up to 7 cards. You can arrange more than 7 cards, but you can arrange 7 cards comfortably. So this is the order they came. They were shuffled, and I'm gonna separate the cards 8 or above and 7 or below. So 8 or above, you strip them out any way you want to do this. So these are 8 or above, and these are 7 or below. It turns out 8 or above is almost in correct order, so I'll shuffle them up just to make it a bit more complicated. Let's say like this. There are, if you think about it, if you have seven cards, there are only so many ways you can arrange them. 7 factorial, which is 5 is 126, I think is 720, and 7 is 5040 or something. And actually it's 5040. But anyhow, so you in order to do this, let's say this is the order they're in. You have to set this so that this is the high cards and this is the low cards. So the order you want to get them in is king through ace, let's say. So the first card you take, in this case, it's an 8. So you know that the other cards have to be above it. The next card you see is a jack. So the jack needs to go on top of the 8, but there have to be a couple of cards that go in between. So you peel off the jack and you hold a break between it and the next cards. And as you retake these cards, you hold a thumb break between the 8 and the jack, and you remember that you have the 8 and the jack, which sounds very complicated, but you will be able to remember. There's an 8, there's a jack. So the 9 goes on top of the 8. So in the next, it's essentially just a Biddle-Steal. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's the essential technique is that of a Biddle-Steal. So for the 9, you do take the 8, but you also peel the 9. So you peel the 9 on top of the 8. So the next one is a king. So as you put them back, whatever breaks you had, you need to transfer the breaks, thumb breaks, to a pinky break, and vice versa. So you remember there's a jack, there's a 9 and an 8, and there's the king. So the king, clearly that's the first one that you need to have. So you peel off the king and you hold a third finger break, and you steal the king as per a standard Biddle-Steal. You steal the king below. The next one is a queen, so you know the queen has to come before the king, or right after the king. So you peel the queen on top of the jack, so that's okay as well. And you steal both the queen and the jack back under the deck, and then you immediately peel the 10, because the 10 goes on top of the 9, which in this case gives you king, queen, jack, 10, 9, 8. And just so you have to do this 2 or 3 times, but you really have to grasp the principle, because I can't give you every one for 5,040 different versions, but once you get the principle, it will make sense. Now the ace is always going to stay at the bottom, because the ace is going to be the top one if they're in ascending order. So you know this. The 5 clearly has to go on top of the ace, and the 7 is the one that comes right after the 8. So you don't really have to worry about the 7. You do peel it off and hold a break below the 7, but on the next one you know you're going to steal back the 7, because the 7 comes after the 8 anyhow. So you steal this one back, but you now have a 4. Remember you had 5, so you peel the 4 between the 5 and whatever's below. And then as you take it back, you pick up the 4 without holding a break below the 5. because there's no break between, there's no space between them. Then you take the 3, you take that back below the 4, and you just keep the ace there because the ace is going to be the top one anyhow. And so now you know you have 5, 4, 3. In other words, if you took your hands off, which you wouldn't do, but if you took them off, you would have, there's the ace, there's the 5, 4, 3. Now the next one is a 6, so the 6 goes on top of the 5. And you know you can just put the whole thing, 6, 5, 4, 3, below the 7, which is already there. And so the last card is the deuce, and that goes on top of the ace, and you have the whole thing in order. I know this sounds extremely complicated, but really, once you understand the principle, it's like a shell. I'm going to try this one last time for you, because it's a lot less complicated than it sounds. Let's do this one last time. So I shuffle them up. Anyway, 1, 2, whatever, and I take out all the high cards. So without the technique, let me just show you the principle. The principle is like you're having a shelf. This is, the breaks act like a shelf. So the first one, the queen, goes into a shelf that goes below the king. Now once you, if the next one is the king goes above the queen without any breaks. And it gets transferred to the top shelf. This is where it stays at. The 8 clearly is below the king. The 9 goes on top of the 8. Now you need an extra shelf because that's the jack. Actually, the jack goes immediately below the queen, and the 10 goes right there. And you don't have shelves when you do this. The shelf is like the various breaks act like your shelves. One last time. So the first one is a 6. There's stuff that goes above the 6. This one goes above the 6. Now in this case you need a shelf, if you will. There's a 5 that goes on top of the 4, and now you no longer need that shelf. They're all one thing. There's a deuce that goes below the 4, so you need a shelf in a sense. There's an ace. You don't need an extra shelf for that, it just goes below the deuce. And then the last one is a 3, and you can drop all shelves, if you will. So rather than calling them breaks, call them shelves, and that's it. Anyhow, it's one of those things. It's just interesting. The next one is actually a lot more practical, and that's the longitudinal color change, and a number of other color changes actually. So let's say you do this with the 4 aces. This is the sort of thing that just suits me because I do this jazz magic or whatever. So let's have the 4 aces at the back of the deck, and you shuffle them and keep them at the back of the deck. The nice thing is, if you have someone cut the cards, now let's try and see you cut to an ace. We'll do this face up, and they cut. Wherever they cut wherever they cut, but of course they don't cut to an ace, and you do that. The reason why I mentioned this is because what it does is if you have them cut the cards, you only have half the deck that you need to work with. If you practice these things, much like the pass or anything else, or bottom deals and whatever, it's nice to have a deck and a half, or maybe even 2 decks. But if you're going to do it, if you can arrange it to have it done with only half a deck, that makes sense too, because it's a lot easier and it looks a lot better. I mean, even Steve Forte, when he does his bottom deal demonstration here, does it so that there's only half a deck, because it's just that much easier. Anyhow, what I wanted to show you as well is it's this sort of a palm, but it makes more sense. I'll show you this in detail. It's like the first part of the Kelly Ovett bottom replacement, but you're doing this ostensibly to turn this card, this part of the deck, 180 degrees. At this point, it's not palmed. It's not palmed at all. It's just clipped. But from this clip, you can easily get it into a classic palm. You can get it into, I mean, any one of those, whether it's diagonal pressure this way, whether it's pressure this way. You can of course get it into a gambler's flat palm, and while it's still clipped, you can just open your hand like so, and you're just holding it against this hand. You can do all of that stuff. For a small packet, this looks very fishy if you just do this. I mean, it's almost obvious when if you just do this. But if the larger motion is that of turning over the packet, I mean, if you do this at a certain clip, this makes perfect sense. I mean, you're just turning these cards over. The other thing I want to mention about this is that if you're going to do any sort of pass with a half a deck, that was a bad one, but I mean any one of those passes we talked about, Infinity Pass or anyone with only half a deck, obviously you only have a quarter of a deck to actually transpose. And the last thing I want to mention, and the one actually that you asked me about, was the longitudinal palm. I don't have a very good method to go into longitudinal palm. I just do that. So it's actually kind of nice because it's of course like a side still, but the side still is done with, and your fingers are immediately open. So if the card is held like this, because you asked me, it shoots out at the side of the hand. So it does this. It goes. If you like, it shoots out here. You create a little bit of pressure by pressing with your thumb, and it shoots out. The snap is actually not a problem because you can do it completely silently, just having inertia do it. Now it's not shooting out, it's just inertia that shoots it out. But there's a lot of movement with the hand. If you don't move the hand at all, then you're right, there's a bit of a snap. If you don't move the hand at all, you just push it out like this. I think probably the best way to do it is to combine a little bit of inertia and a little bit of a snap, and then like I said last time, if you just move this hand afterwards, that's kind of nice. So I hope that makes sense. By the way, the idea with a longitudinal bit is to have the card stop at your index finger. If you didn't have your index finger there, the card would overshoot. It would overshoot the edge of the deck. But if you have your finger there, it stops, and it stops in close to perfect alignment. And one very last thing I wanted to mention about this is if you're going to do this with half a deck, and if you're going to do what I talked about last time, something that I found, it's a small detail, but anyhow, if you hold the cards like so and you drop them, they will move. They'll obviously move from here to there. And if you combine this, not in a longitudinal palm, but in a regular, you just drop them. If you combine this, and I like to do this for a flat palm as well because it's nice, because the way my hand is, there seems to be, they just seem to be held nicely and very flat, and clearly I'm not hiding anything in them, but anyhow, if you combine this, that was kind of bad, but or a classic palm, whatever you want to do. If you just drop them and drop the card at the same time, you do see the card drop, but of course it drops because the whole packet drops. So you would think that this is the cause. You actually do that, and to me, the definition of magic, by the way, to me is to assign a false causality to a phenomenon, whatever it is. If you can assign a false causality, but not actually the cause, then you're doing magic. I mean, at the very core of it. But anyway, so if this is apparently the cause, and you see that movement, then I think the color change looks good as well. It's not an absolute necessity, of course. You can just do that, but it's nice. It's just something to play around with. But I'm very pleased that this longitudinal palm is not something that you immediately figured out. So anyhow, I hope that clarified things, and have a good one. Thanks for watching.